Hey, welcome to Haphazard Homestead. I'm glad you're here. How bitter are wild greens? That's a common question that I get. In this video, I'm going to go over 3 ways that we can talk about bitter flavors that may help you know in advance which wild greens you might prefer. Nobody wants to go to the trouble to find, pick, and prepare wild greens only to find out that the flavors just aren't what you prefer. We don't run into bitter flavors very often in our fruits and vegetables that we get at the store or that we even grow in the garden. There are a lot of things that affect the bitterness levels in wild plants. The kind of plant they are, the conditions they're growing under, how mature they are, and then how we prepare them. All those things affect how bitter the flavors are in the foods that we might prepare using wild plants. But which ones will you like? So I have 3 ways to think about what your preferences might be for the levels of bitter flavors in foods. The first is chocolate. It's good to have a reason to eat chocolate, just so we can talk about what flavors we like in wild greens, isn't it? Do you prefer milk chocolate, or do you go for that dark chocolate with a high level of cocoa in it, maybe 70 or 80% cocoa, or even bittersweet chocolate, or unsweetened chocolate? If you go for milk chocolate, your preferences are for greens that are not very bitter. But if you're going for that dark chocolate, yeah, you're a candidate for some of the more bitter greens. The second way to think about bitter flavors is coffee. Is coffee just too bitter for you? Or do you like your coffee with a lot of cream and sugar in it as a way to mellow out some of its bitter flavors? Or do you go for dark coffee? Or do you go for black coffee, something where it lets all the flavor of that coffee come through? If you go for the black coffee, the full flavored coffee, you may prefer the more bitter flavored greens. But if you don't even like coffee, you're going to be wanting the greens that have no bitter flavors at all. The third way of thinking about bitter flavors is with beer. There are so many styles of beer. Some, like wheat beers and mainstream mass market beers, have low levels of bitter flavors. Others, like India Pale Ales or IPAs, have high levels of bitter flavors in them. That's part of the style of the beer. So if you prefer a wheat beer or a standard mass market mainstream beer, you may prefer to have greens that don't have much bitterness in them. But if you like an IPA, you may like greens that are more mature or that have a higher level of bitter flavors in them. These days, some beers even have International Bitterness Units, or IBUs, listed right on the labels. If you find yourself going for the IBUs that are in 3 digits, you know that you'll like any kind of wild green. So there you are, chocolate, coffee, and beer. 3 ways to gauge your preferences for different levels of bitter flavor. Now, if you don't like bitter flavors at all, there are still wild greens that I bet you will like. There are so many good wild greens out there. Our preferences for bitter flavors or non-bitter flavors shouldn't limit our interest in going out and getting wild greens. Plants like lamb's quarter have no bitterness. They are so good. And there are ways to prepare greens to minimize any bitter flavors. Things like making a sweet and sour greens or making creamed greens. I've covered some of those in past videos. I hope you find this helpful in talking about the flavors of wild greens and what your preferences might be for bitter flavors. I hope things are going well at your place. Thanks for stopping by. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. If this is your first time here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. Thanks for watching. Bye.